Mark 16, verses 15 and 16. And he said to them, Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. He who has believed and has been baptized shall be saved, but he who disbelieves shall be condemned. Hello and welcome to the Cornersville Christian Podcast. We appreciate you tuning in. Today, we got Jimmy Jean, I'm Bobby Wayne, and we got Mason Norman with us today. So we appreciate Mason joining us, and I'm really excited to hear what he's going to tell us. He's done a lot of things in his life so far. And,
at a very young age.
Yeah, at a young age, he's done a lot, and I'm excited to hear from him. Did some mission work, Tanzania, right?
That's right, yeah.
And been in the military. And
At a very young age.
At the ripe age of 30. Tired.
So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I remember Jimmy asked just a few minutes ago off camera if me and Mason knew each other, and I remember Mason in high school, kind of funny. Mason, I guess, was real big in the FCA, and I don't know if you remember this or not, but he would try to get me to speak at FCA, and if you remember me as a,
That didn't work, did it?
I actually don't remember that.
Yeah,
That's funny.
I thought it was funny because he would always ask me, hey, you want to speak at FCA, and I think I always turned him down because if you remember me as a high schooler, I wasn't much on talking, and people asked me, now, how in the world are you a youth minister? But we making it work. But anyways, all right. Well, Jimmy, you got anything to say?
No, I'm just really looking forward. The Bible teaches us to go into all the world and preach the gospel, and Mason and Haley actually did. And I am really anxious to hear from him. The congregation here was his home supporter for three plus years. So we had a faith in Mason and Haley, and they didn't disappoint God. They didn't disappoint us in all the work that they did. So we're really looking forward to hearing about some of the stories.
All right, Mason, we'll let you just dive right in. Tell us about yourself. Tell us,
Sure. Yeah, so I'll start. A lot of people listening to this podcast directly enabled us to be in Africa, right? And we talk about prayers, we talk about financial support. And when I say, like, no kidding, we could have not been there without the churches, not only here, but in this area, it would have never happened.
Yeah.
I would say probably, if I had to do the math, 75 to 80% of our financial support was within probably a 30 or 40 mile radius of this church building. So this community enabled us to be there, which is pretty cool to think about, right?
Yeah.
That people who've never stepped foot in Africa, they were there, right? Because they sent. And I think that's important to think about. So kind of to give a little bit of background information, the funny part, I'll start with FCA. I wasn't an athlete at the time. There were Christian people there, and I was like, that'd be kind of neat to be a part of. So anyways, so this church, I initially, in 2013, I went to college at Freed-Hardeman. And this church not only helped me in Africa, but also helped me in that journey with my education at Freed-Hardeman. And it's so expensive to go there. I could only do 2 years there. So I did, just over 2 years there and finished up my degree in December of 2015. And I actually missed my college graduation to take a survey trip to Africa. So I kind of heard about Tanzania, East Africa, from, it would be my in-laws. At that point, they weren't. But they had been going for some time. About a decade or so, I guess. I can't remember exactly when their first trip was, but they'd been going over there doing some work, and they said, hey, you should really check this place out. And it was of interest to me because I'd heard about the School of Preaching over there. It's an undergraduate program, but you could teach with as long as you were working on a master's degree at the time. which if you want to teach in any program in the States, typically they want you to have a doctorate degree. And I was pretty far from that at the time, right? So I was pretty interested in the idea of I could go over there and teach at a school of preaching. And it's funny because, I did some teaching, and I think I did more learning than teaching, though.
Yeah.
But anyways, we did our survey trip in December of 15 and came back, spent 3 months fundraising, which is, looking back,
Wow.
People normally spend 6 months to a year minimum to fundraise. I think we moved over there with, like $3,000 or $4,000 a month short. And you say, well, why do you need so much money to go to Africa? Well, look up plane ticket prices. We bought a 1996 vehicle over there, and I want to think it was like $16,000 or $17,000.
Wow.
It's just expensive, right?
Yeah.
If you want to, eat rice and beans every day, and you want to live in a little hut, you can live cheap. But if you like electric and you like water,
Which
and-
most people do.
yeah, and you want a fan going, not air conditioner, but just a fan,
Yeah.
it'll cost you a little bit. So anyways, we moved over there, probably had no business going. Now I look back, we probably should have spent a little bit more time preparing. And part of the story that a lot of people don't know, so Haley and I got married on March 26th, and we moved to Africa on April 12th.
Oh, wow.
And people always ask, why did you do that? And that was the best way to do it, because we didn't know married life here.
Yeah.
We just learned what married life was there. And it was chaos, because I was going to, technically was a full-time graduate student. I was teaching a ton of classes at the preaching school and doing evangelism. So I worked way too much, and looking back, I realized that I did not have a good family balance. And that would be one of the things that, as a young minister, you have to protect your family. That's the one thing that I got wrong, and it led to some strife. I'll just be honest along the way. So anyways, we moved there April 12th, and my first day in Africa, go ahead.
Was your in-laws there?
They were not. They
okay.
came in maybe July
Okay,
timeframe, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So we were over there. We got to make all the mistakes, and then they got to come, the house was mostly set up after I made all the mistakes.
Right.
You never think about it, but it's like you move to a new place. Where do you get food at? Where do you get a refrigerator at? Where do you get, where do you pay your electric at? All these things. And I didn't know the language, which that was another mistake. If I would have go back again, I would have just, however long it take to learn the language, that's what I would have done. I knew, some very, very basic stuff, but I'm just basically they call it the Mzungu, which to them means the white guy, but really it means one who walks in circles. And I did a lot of walking in circles to figure out, where to get the basic necessities of life. And they don't mean that as an insult. It's just their culture. That's what they've done. Or maybe they do mean it as an insult.
Maybe,
Who knows? But that's what we're always called, was Mzungu. So anyways, did that, kind of got established. And the first day in Africa, I remember we had bought a car before we moved over there, and I was sitting at the school of preaching, and they said, your car's outside. And they drove this car from Dar es Salaam all the way to Arusha, which you look at a map and, it doesn't look far, but the roads, I mean, you think about whatever like I-40, the worst potholes, and you're basically just driving on that for, a long time. And I got in this car, and the outside looked great. But when you drive, you'd start driving, it would pop, grind, make all kind of crazy noises. I was thinking, man, what did we get ourselves into? And you really don't want to be broken down on the side of the road over there. So I think the first day we spent like $1,500 on replacing the suspension on it. And I learned very quickly, I bought parts from a local parts store. Well, I assumed that they were new parts. They were used parts. So then about a week later, I got to do it again. And I bought new parts that time. But, learning lessons, right? But yeah, I remember I was pulling out this place called Sable Square, and this was like my first day in Africa, and I'm getting settled in, and I kind of look right, left, or driving on the opposite side of the road, which is already weird, right? And I get ready to pull out, and I pull out, and then I look back right, and I see this car. He is flying. And I just hit the brakes, and he hits the horn, and he swerves right, and there's this huge drop-off, and there's these trees, like where they try to do a little bit of landscaping. And he swerves down there, almost flips his vehicle, he like swiped the left side of his car on one of those trees, and then the car was just smoking. And there's all this dirt because it's so dry. There's dirt everywhere. And I just kept my right turn going. And then I sat in the house for a couple of days because I said, man, I wonder if they'll chase you down here. Like, do they have cameras? Or, I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
But, looking back, I could have just kept going with my life and been fine. But I was pretty worried for a couple of days. That was my first day.
Yeah.
It was chaos. And then
first day, I mean, already almost in a car accident.
Yeah.
I was thinking, man, I'm going to die my first day in Africa. Well, how would that be? But Haley was in the car with me too, so that didn't help.
Wow.
But and then I remember, I kind of sat there for literally it was 2 or 3 days, like worried about this, and I was trying to get the house settled. And then the next week, I was like, oh, I'll prepare a little bit more for my Christian ethics course coming up at the school. And they called me that Monday at like 9, and they said, where are you at? And I said, what do you mean where I'm at? I teach next week. They said, no, we're starting you this week. So I showed up to Christian ethics course late, and we jumped in, and I had this student named Pius teaching Christian ethics. And
how many students was in the course,
we had, I don't know, maybe 20, right at 20. They have 2 tracks over there. What's called the Swahili track and the English track. I was teaching the English track, which is typically you get a wide array of audience. You get them from different countries, basically. But English is pretty well known over there. But all the other people, if you're coming from like Ethiopia or Kenya, you're going to know English for sure. So anyways, I started teaching, and, I had an assignment where they had to memorize some Bible verses. And, he was dark-complected individual from Kenya. And he came in, and he was really quick on writing this verse out, and it was a pretty long verse, and I was like, man, how did he do that? But I noticed he kept looking at his arm, and he had used black ink and wrote the Bible verse on his arm. And that's how and this is a Christian ethics class.
In ethics, yeah.
So it was quite the story, quite the example, and, quite the memory for me as I got started in Africa. And I quickly realized these people are very smart. They haven't been given the opportunity, but they look at life a lot different than the way I look at life, right? And when I think about ethics, and this is one of the things we talked about in that class, and I think it's, directly applicable for us today, we get so caught up on the action itself, whether, like stealing is bad. Well, stealing is bad, right? Because God said so.
Yeah.
But there are other things that we kind of don't think about. And I would say that it starts is your motivation to do something, right? So before I ever do anything, my motivation to act matters. Then the action itself matters. And then lastly, the consequences of the action matter, right? And getting them to understand that was almost like beating your head on a concrete wall. It was just
Was it motivated?
Impossible. They really believe in situation ethics, which the church has taken a kind of a turn here. And a lot of people believe in situation ethics of where, whatever the situation is, there's a right or wrong for that situation versus that the scriptures teach there's an absolute standard of right and wrong despite the situation, right? But situation ethics over there is kind of the norm. So created a lot of challenges, for sure.
If your family is starving, it's sort of okay
to steal, or it's okay to, and there would be people, it was interesting because as much as they believed in situation ethics, they also believed in punishment. So you'd have a kid, that was taught from a very young age, if you don't have anything, you got to go source it.
Right.
So he would go steal, and they would stone that kid, for example, with cinder blocks. So they take it very seriously. But they're also very community-focused, community-based, right? So if you just ask for food, they'll give you food. So it's a very weird, maybe they would look at our culture and say it's weird too, right? But coming from Cornersville, where we have one flashing yellow light at the time, to go into there, a city of, I don't know, close to 1 million people by the time you think about the kind of the outer skirts of the city, and being thrust into this situation where there's all these different tribes was quite interesting. So I'll quickly kind of hit on some of the tribal things that I thought was interesting that I think people will find at least somewhat interesting. So there's the Maasai tribe, which is, they're kind of the ones you see on TV. They got all the fabric wrapped around them, and they're out there with their cows. And First of all, the thing I learned about these people was they carry a big knife, and normally they have a lot of money under that little wrap that they have on because they sell cows. Yeah. And they would raise up that little wrap, and they would just have a brick of money under there. But they got their knife right beside it, so they're good to go.
Yeah.
But you would see those people, they stand out there. But there was this place called Kyogo, which was, I don't know, maybe a 45-minute drive from where we lived, and you had to go up the mountain. There's Mount Meru there. And so you're at the foothills of the mountain. You look up; it's just beautiful. There's you got the monkeys and the snakes and all the things. But, anyways, I went up there, and the first time I ever saw one of these individuals, so they practiced circumcision later on in life, basically around the teenage age.
Wow.
And during the circumcision period, the kids are more or less able to do whatever they want to do because they're going to be an adult on the other side. In their culture, they're viewed as an adult after this period, right. So they get all the crazy things out as a teenager. So they paint their faces white, and they'll wear all black, and then they go around and terrorize people for basically a week or so, and then after that they're circumcised, and they're men after that. If it was only that easy, right?
Yeah.
But nevertheless, they were teaching this thing in the church that everyone had to be circumcised, and it's interesting that. You read books like Galatians and you think, well, that was an ancient problem. Wow. Well, that's actually a current problem in some places. So I went up there and did a seminar on Galatians, and the last day, we did a question and answer, and who knew there could be so many questions about circumcision and about, how their tribal tendencies, agree and disagree with the book of Galatians. It was fascinating. Wasn't prepared for that at the time because the book is very clear on on what Paul expects and what ultimately how the church should handle that matter. But there were a lot of nuances. So you have you have different tribes. You have like the Maasai tribe. You have one tribe, the Chaga tribe, the Hadzabe tribes. And they're all kind of known for something. So like some of these tribes are known to have money. Some of them are known to, be cattle farmers. Some of them are, whatever the thing is. But this other tribe, the Hadzabe tribe, they wear kind of like animal skins as clothes. They live in caves, and still to this day.
Wow.
And I'd studied with this guy, and it's a place called Karatu. It was about, 2 hours from where we lived. I'd drive out there once or twice a week, and he told me he was, a preacher of a small church. It wasn't a Church of Christ, but he was a preacher at a small church, and I studied with him. We baptized him. We kind of taught him a better way, and he said, "I'm going to invite you to my home to preach." And I said, "That's great. That's what everybody says, right?" And I get a call about a month later. He says, "You have to come." And I didn't know where I was going, but I said, "I'll come, right? I'll go." And we drove out there. I had a translator, and we drove dirt roads for 6-7 hours. And it was just washboard. I remember there were so many times where the vehicle would just turn completely 90 degrees to the road because it was so bad, and then you would just let off the gas, and it would kind of correct a little bit. And we get out there, and I pull up, and these people with animal skins and bows surround my vehicle, and they're speaking in a different language I've never heard before. So they speak in a clicking language. And I know English, and I know very basic Swahili at this point, right? And this is unlike anything I've heard. And I'm terrified, I'll just be honest with you, because I have first of all, man, we did so many, we didn't have a first aid kit, we didn't have any protection, we didn't have anything. I don't know what I was thinking. But I don't even think I had any food with me at that point. I just really, not wise. Travel that far, in the backcountry of East Africa. But we pull up, and they surround my vehicle, and they're talking, and I get out, and they're showing me their house, which is a pretty typical thing to do. And we kind of walk up to the cave, and I look in, and there's like an antelope-looking skin thing on the ground. And they're like, "That's my bed," and it was wild. And then they bring me down, and they're shooting their bows and showing me how they can shoot. And and then he jumps in. One of them jumps in the car and says, "We're gonna go a little bit farther." So we drive another 30 minutes to an hour, however long it was. And he said, "We're going to the church building." So I'm, what's this church building going to be like? And we get up there, I hear singing, and I don't see any building. And we kind of go over this little rise, and the church building was a big tree that they met under.
Wow.
And there was, I don't know, 50 or 60 people there that he had baptized in that month time period, and he had converted them to the truth.
Wow.
Just an amazing story of someone who learned the gospel and takes it serious, to go back home and do that kind of thing. So probably enough of the stories. Some things that, we can kind of jump into about what I learned about Satan in the church from living in Africa. And I think that whether you find yourself in Africa or you find yourself in Cornersville or New Mexico, they're kind of universal truths. So the first one is Satan looks for people with influence. You see this, time and time again of Satan has a tendency to go after people who have influence over others because they have impact, right? Influence equals impact. It's just that simple, right? Yeah. And when you think about really the truth of the matter, we all have some influence. Yeah. Whether it's influence over someone's heart, it's influence over the church, influence over your family. We have influence over something. And Satan is looking to exploit that influence for his good. So we have a choice to make. And when I think about my time in Africa, I very much see that that's how Satan worked. Sometimes it was with missionaries. Sometimes it was with preachers. Sometimes with men who were trying to step up. So you're dealing with, a culture and a church over there that I think maybe 1 or 2 churches in the country had elders. That's it. As a young church, right? The church has been around forever, but over there, it really only been around for, I'm sure in isolation it was around, before this, but largely for about 20 years. So you didn't have a lot of churches with elders. They were very reluctant to have elders, although I think there were men that were qualified. And Satan was able to use that against the church quite a bit. And I think that he does the same thing here, just in a different capacity. The next thing that I learned about Satan is he uses distractions, divisions, and disturbances to bring about his will. So we'll kind of talk about distractions first. Distraction is something that inherently is a good thing, but Satan can use it for his will instead of the will of God. And, you think about in the book of Acts when there was this need to feed people, right? And in Acts chapter 6, I believe. And long story short, you see that, they say, this is a good ministry, but we need to dedicate ourselves to a different ministry, the ministry of the word, the proclamation of the gospel. Mm-hmm. That's a distraction, right? Because if they would have got so consumed by this one ministry, they would have neglected the weightier matters, right? And Satan is so good at that. He gets us to major in the minor things instead of majoring in the major things. Yeah. And we see this all the time, even today, right? Is when we have, disagreements over, what the paint's going to look like, what the parking lot's going to look like, what the, the building's going to, whatever the thing is, that is Satan getting his way in the church because he gets us to focus on that instead of lost souls. Yep. And man, I'm guilty of that. There's so many opportunities there that, if you just go with the first thing that's presented, you would find yourself majoring in the minor things. So certainly guilty. Division is pretty easy to understand, I think, is simply where there's personality conflict. And,
Wasn't there, while over there, wasn't there a Brotherhood church that was what we would call liberal?
Yeah. So there, and that's the thing when you think about these mission fields. We're not the only people that are sending missionaries.
They're from all kinds of,
Yeah, and dealing with, we have conflict here about how we think about churches that do certain things. And you get that in the mission field and it's amplified because your influence is greater, right? Because what the missionary comes and says it carries a lot of weight. Yeah. So if I get someone over there that's teaching a liberal doctrine or whatever we want to call it, a doctrine that we think is, it could be more conservative than the scriptures, right? It doesn't have to always be liberal. It can be either way. But yeah, certainly it has to be taken so seriously. But the issue is when it's not a good look when you have 2 missionaries that come from America and they don't agree, right? But if me and you were both to go over there and work and we were both to teach for 3 years nonstop, there would be things that we disagree on. Yeah. And the people there Unfortunately, and this is the work of Satan, if they notice any discrepancy in thought or in teaching, they are going to point it out and basically force you to address it.
Well, see, you said that I had that same thing happen to me here. It's been 20, 25 years ago. And basically, me and this other guy, both members of the church, a little doctrine in an area that we didn't agree on. And I was talking to this other person who wasn't a member of the church. And man, he was interested in and this other guy was coming behind my back saying, now, we do that, but they do this. And that guy came to me, he said, why should I become part of what you believe when y'all don't agree with? And I was speechless. Yeah. I said, I understand.
It's frustrating for that person, right?
Yes.
When there's discrepancy in what's being taught. Especially when we bear the same thing on our signs.
And I told him, I said, what I want to do is try to get you to become a Christian. And then after that, we'll sit down. But he never obeyed the gospel.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
No.
But that's the work of Satan. He gets us to focus on, I don't want to say the topics, they don't matter, but one that comes to mind that we've been arguing over in this area for years is the indwelling of the Spirit. Yeah. Whether it's through the Word only or whether it actually indwells people. Non-miraculous, right? I'm not talking about anything miraculous here. But people have been, it's probably time that we focus a little bit less on that and more on all the lost souls in our community.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that we never talk about it. But it means that if that becomes our focus, that's the work of Satan. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing I think Satan does, so we talk about like disturbance. You see this it's when bad things happen to good people. Satan is able to use that. So Stephen's a good example. And man, what a fascinating passage. I was looking at it this morning when it says that he called upon the Lord. To me, it seems like it wasn't like, hey, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. It was this prolonged calling as they're stoning him. I don't know how, whether did that take 30 seconds? Did it take 3 minutes? Did it take 10 minutes? I don't know. But it seems like it wasn't just this one-time thing, but this prolonged calling. Can you imagine? You have Paul standing there, and you have these other people that are stoning him, and he's calling out, Lord Jesus, repeatedly as he's being stoned. That would, I have to think that later in Paul's ministry, that had to just ring in his mind. Stephen calling out.
Because he was there. Yeah.
That's right. Over in Acts chapter 7, verse 58, I believe. Yeah. We can go there real quick. Kind of talk about that. Verse 59 is what I'm referring to of Acts chapter 7. They went on stoning Stephen as he called on the Lord and said, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. So to me, it seems like there's this prolonged calling.
And I like verse 60 when he called out, lay not this sin to their charge. Basically saying, Father, forgive them.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. I mean, how many of us?
If we only had that kind of forgiveness.
Yes.
I'm guilty too.
Yes.
Because I've been away for, I moved to Africa in 16, college in 13, and then kind of been gone since, and just now getting reestablished. And it's so easy to remember the things that happened, that many years ago as like they happened yesterday.
Yeah.
And that's not the attitude Stephen had, and it's not the attitude, anybody should have.
You just finished watching part 1 of Going to All the World with me, Bobby Wayne Lee, Jimmy Jean, and our guest, Mason Norman. Thank you for watching. Tune in next week as we have part 2 with Mason. Thank you and have a great day.